We gotta get more people.
Also a possible release of an unknown hazardous chemical into the atmosphere.
Some of us firefighters are over here right now. We want to get you all in the same area, okay?
1564, it's a preliminary to then see what the status is on that possible hazard.
I got a critical here now!
Any kind of emergency exercise that can give all of our, whether you are police officer, whether you are fire officer, whether you are any kind of community representative, to give your community as much safety as possible is a good exercise. To have the CHERCAP exercise was a culmination, again, of putting together as much of an emergency plan that we felt we could put together with our professional staff. There is always danger of chemical disasters in a community where you have a first-class rail going through your community, where you have 15 intersections that automobiles are crossing, where you have also an interstate highway as part of your community border responsibility, and where you have industry that again is going to be involved in any kind of chemical use.
Chief?
Take it.
Our former chief applied for the CHERCAP grant, which is run through the federal government, and we weren't aware of that. Then he retired, and the first we really heard about it is they said, by the way, we're here from the federal government and we're here to help. And we realized we're involved in a process, the CHERCAP process, which is very labor intensive, money that we hadn't budgeted for, so it became quite a project for us, and we were playing catch up most of the time to get prepared to do the presentation, is the way I recall it.
It's very good.
Yeah, I
You got a phone call.
What's that?
Phone call from
Okay.
FEMA or somebody.
Say congratulations.
You've been selected.
You've been
You're the
selected.
lucky ones.
Yeah.
People from FEMA came and said, hey, we're here from the federal government, we're here to help you. Actually came as a surprise because Chief Stedman had set this program up and really didn't tell anybody about it, and he retired, and shortly after he retired, Mr. Higgins and some people came and said, hey, here we are, and it's been a very positive experience. It was the first part of the program. They reviewed our emergency plans, went over policies, training, looked at equipment, guidelines. They met with all different organizations. Phase 2, they came back, or after meeting with us, formulated written comments with suggestions, recommendations for improvements, reviewed our 911 center, some of the deficiencies, maybe in training and things that they identified in the initial training. Changes that were made after phase 3 is we created the EOC that you're in here, that you're in today, that Kevin will give a little bit of a tour. We revised our city emergency plan to address our changes, but also to address deficiencies that were noted throughout the exercise. We've then implemented hazardous materials physical medical evaluation program that meets all of the OSHA standards. And also one of the things that we found out is that we were dependent on our dispatch center solely and did not have a redundant site in case we have to evacuate our dispatch center if there was a fire, in this case a hazardous materials incident. We did not have a very good backup plan. There were plans in place, but they weren't very effective, and we've been able to create a new backup 911 center. So what we're going to do is stage an event tomorrow to test this.
The thing that impressed me the most again was that those of us who represent different elements of local, county, and state and or federal, because we also had observers at this exercise from the FEMA District 5 office, which again does encompass the Midwest of the United States. We had observers from the state of Wisconsin Emergency Operations Management staff, to know that all of us were able to have a part in the city of Waukesha's first for real exercise, and that we were all able to learn together how collaboration and respect for each other is truly what the key is to success.
I think in my case, I was the shift commander on duty that day, so I kind of had the first responsibilities from our department. And to kind of think about the magnitude of the exercise, that it is an exercise, that you got people outside your organization watching over your shoulder over the whole thing was kind of a nervous thing. And also, like the chiefs had talked about before too, that opportunity to work with people that you've never worked before, not knowing how you interface or what they're going to do or what they expect us to type thing, kind of made us pretty nervous, I guess, to be honest, to start with.
I think everyone had, different levels of apprehension about the whole thing, different stress levels. I mean, Chief Buchholz typically is a shift commander and typically responds to similar types of calls, obviously not that big in nature. And so he's somewhat, in his environment, but again, it's a larger call. It's not a typical day-to-day activity. So, he had his stressors involved in there. From my perspective, I think what I was a little nervous about is, as I said before, is my job was to work in the Emergency Operations Center, which was a whole new center that we have never had before, that we took a lot of time and effort and taxpayer money to put together, and to actually test that center, make sure that the telephones are working and all those little things. And then plus, try to coordinate what's happening out in the field, trying to make sure that what Phil is doing and what the police department is doing and other entities are doing are all working together. And so it was, for me, I was nervous about that whole situation. It was a whole new facility, and as I mentioned before, groups of people that typically don't work together in an emergency situation. So I guess that's what I was somewhat apprehensive about. And obviously there's people from the federal government and different agencies looking over your shoulder. I mean, literally in some instances, when you're drawing on a map or having a discussion with the police chief or the city administrator, is literally over your shoulder, listening to your conversation, taking notes down and things like that. So, but again, I mean, if you look at it, and I always look at those situations as learning experiences. And, we're not all perfect, and we're going to make, some mistakes. We're not going to do things exactly as they're supposed to be done, but that's the time to do those things. I mean, that's the time to make those errors, because when the real situation happens, there is no second chance, or as we said before, any do-overs. And so, I guess that's what I was apprehensive about, being in that whole different environment.
And I guess Steve and my stressors were a little different. I mean, the chief and Phil had to do their jobs while being observed by all these experts. And so, there's a little more pressure. Steve and I did a lot of the groundwork to put it together, and we facilitated the program that day. So in essence, for me, it was relief, because it was finally over, a year worth of work, we're done. So I was like, let's just let it happen. I wasn't being evaluated all day unless the exercise itself failed because we forgot to put something somewhere, or whatever those were. By that time, we were pretty comfortable that it was going to run itself. So for us, at least for me, it was a relief.
I don't get nervous. I at times have concerns that hopefully what we have planned can actually happen, but I also had confidence in our staff that if one situation would have a reverse, that we always would have a second game plan available. So no, I was not nervous.
Fire. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to make that judgment tomorrow morning.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, that one with the Brian. Freeman is going to have a photographer. The bus obviously is sitting over here laid on its side. We met with the DNR. Where the environmental aspect will come in more is up at the Golden Guernsey. Then I'm going to go through just an overview of the exercise, some of the rules. Give you a chance to see how the EOC is going to be set up a little bit here.
Here we have 3 operations groups, with 4 phones dedicated to each one.
People who aren't familiar with the area should in their packet have maps. Any questions? Nobody's sleeping yet, so it can't be that bad. Actually, what I envisioned, and I don't know, just, and I'll interject, I'll let you guys work it out, so I don't know. But what I kind of looked at your role would be, is to go in between.
I know the moulage, one of the ladies doing our moulage was saying, oh, I take these from all the dinners and we boil the bones so I can break them and stick them out and stuff. And I was like, you're way too into this. You know that. Well, they think I'm pretty weird at the family dinners too because I save those. So I thought that was interesting.
It was pretty amazing some of the things they came up with, because we didn't give the people who did the moulage or the makeup a lot of direction. We gave them cards with what we'd like to see and just kind of let them loose, and they were quite creative with what they had and the resources, and all of the volunteers who are victims were into it and did a nice job, and you could see people when they're getting ready comparing what injury they had compared to another one, and mine was better than yours kind of thing. So that part of it was kind of nice. And again, they were all volunteers, people who came out from the community, from the hospital, from other fire departments, and volunteered to help us out to add that level of realism so that when the emergency responders got there that they could actually deal with it. A lot of times, like Kevin said, we do exercises where there'll be a card, or pretend you have this, but they actually had things, props that were there that could test their, how well they react to it. And based on that, we looked at things and revised plans and procedures that we had.
And I didn't see any of it, so I'm waiting for the film to come out because from the EOC we didn't get to see any of the fun things, so which is fairly realistic. In the EOC, your only picture of what's going on is what they're transmitting to you by radio or phones on your communications process. So I was there early in the morning when they were doing moulaging, but then I have really no concept of how all the pieces fell together that day. Because is this what should happen at this time? And so I haven't seen any of that until the movie comes out, although I'd read the book if there was one. But
right behind the police department on Owens Drive, determined that it was a bus and two cars in a bus with a number of people that were injured. Bromine was being released from a tank that was involved. They've had an initial area cordoned off of Northview to Aviation Drive from Moreland to Delafield, and they projected a plume with the leak, and that takes us from basically Delafield over to Moreland, evacuation of Hawthorne School, Summitview School, and UW Waukesha, which are in the immediate plume area. And people will be taken over to Butler Middle School. Apparently that's been established as the evacuation point. Wayne, do you have any on the police side? Okay. Does anybody have any questions?
What's the reactability of bromine with water? Is it heavy? Is it light? I mean, is it gas? Okay.
Bromine is heavier than water. Thanks. It's got a fairly high vapor pressure, so it likes to
It's going to stay close to the ground.
it's going to stay close to the ground. It's heavier than air, and it's heavier than water. It
Does it dissolve in the water?
If it is
4% soluble in water.
Water, it will become more reactive, but it hasn't gotten to any water at this point.
I've been notified of a secondary incident that's happened at Golden Guernsey, dealing with one of three, unless we've narrowed it down.
Not as of yet.
Okay, it's either ammonia, nitric acid, or sulfuric acid, and which brings a concern to us, because if that does mix with the bromine, we really have a potential of a major situation.
Excuse me, Red Cross Chief.
Oh, okay. I'm a little confused by that. Yeah.
How many people are in the evacuation area, approximately?
Population.
We'll have to get back in there. We're on the phone.
The health department is extremely concerned. They need a map for them to zero in on what area we are evacuating at this time. And so I don't know where a map would be, Mr. Vitale, but if you could grab one right here, and then if somebody from the police or somebody can come over and immediately help identify. most definitely. And one of the things, we have a few council members here, we're going to be getting some maps that will be permanently here in our EOC center.
I know you're not supposed to. About 15 or 10 more and also to the west of the incident.
Got Purdy here with those three chemicals
Right.
that we're dealing with from Golden Guernsey next.
And we've got Brookfield HAZMAT dealing with Golden Guernsey.
All right.
Okay? Give us.
Building, car 1503 is command at this time. 63 to command. 1563, go ahead.
We're going to get some help for you right away, okay? There's other vehicles on the road that are coming up.
Just hang in there, I see that, okay? Equipment is station 1 and we'll be on the scene.
Just hang on. Stay in the vehicle.
I'd like to give an update. You ready? I'd like to give an update on the EOC incident. There has been a number of injuries related to the accident that's occurred at Delafield and Owens Drive. 24 individuals have been transported to Waukesha Memorial Hospital and 6 to Community Memorial Hospital. Their status is unknown. There are 8 area departments assisting the city in this EOC incident. The Brookfield HAZMAT team is dealing with the chemical spill. The chemical has been identified as bromine, a chemical which is a poisonous gas which does affect the nervous and the circulatory system. Therefore, the reason for the evacuation. I just gave the 4th press release to the media and really updated them on the EOC incident, which included the number of people who have been transported to Waukesha Memorial as well as Community Memorial. We've also indicated the number of departments.
Operationally, we've practiced HAZMAT, done HAZMAT, and we'd say, okay, now we'd send people to the hospital. And in some cases we do. We work a lot with our hospital, the trauma center here, but we don't work with the other hospitals. But we'd say, well, we'd send them there, and that would all work out fine. We'd have county organizations, county health and all, that's what they would do now. We just assume it would work. But CHERCAP didn't look at the fire department alone. They went and evaluated the hospitals. They evaluated county health. They evaluated emergency management. So they looked at all those issues that really isn't our place to do. We've never done it. And then when we did the exercise, even leading up to that during the tabletops, we realized things we thought would happen weren't necessarily going to happen. What we thought people would do, they thought that somebody else would do. Hospitals didn't talk to each other. So coordinating where the patients went, or even just people responding from a large-scale incident to multiple sites, wasn't going to be very smooth. And so the hospitals ended up forming a coalition or group, and that came out of the CHERCAP where they meet regularly now. Decon is a very big issue at the hospitals. They're doing, they're looking at buying systems, integrating, communicating daily. We work very closely now with county health, what they can and can't do, what they expect from us, and how they interface. The Red Cross, when we call them. There's a lot of those interagency things that you test, and unless you can do a large-scale event where everybody's sort of forced to come to the table and to practice and do it, what you think is going to work isn't necessarily going to. And at a large-scale incident, it's a real bad time to find out that what you thought was going to happen isn't necessarily going to happen. And that's really what I think CHERCAP did for us is like Chief Phil pointed out, it pointed to some things we need to work, what works well, what we could improve, but more importantly, these aren't individual agency events. These are community-based events, and if the community doesn't work as a team, all the agencies involved, it doesn't get better. And what we found is we had a pretty good foundation, but we needed to add building blocks, and those processes have been ongoing just because of the experience of CHERCAP brought people together, and they all went through the same learning process as we did, where this worked, this didn't, we need to communicate better. And all those agencies still today are improving their individual deliveries, and we're still communicating on a broad basis on what we can improve, not just for HAZMAT, but like the Chief pointed out, for all types of timely events, the terrorism events, the tornadoes, weather type events. So operationally, the long-term growth wasn't necessarily how well did we handle this hazmat on this given day. It became how well are we as a community going to adapt to solve tomorrow's problems, and what can we do as emergency responders and community officials to make sure that when these events happen, and they do, that we'll have processes in place to ensure successful outcomes.
Backwards and 1, 2, 3. Just north of the Waukesha Fire Department command post, and hold your position there.
Waukesha Memorial Hospital is doing a large patient load for real, so the Waukesha Memorial is now out of the drill as of this time. So if there's any communications you need with Waukesha Memorial, just fill out a message slip and pretend you call them. They have shut down the exercise at Waukesha. They have transported, treated all they were going to get anyway, and they are now in the business of real business.
Once you get in there and get things working, you can kind of take a look and realize resources throughout the county that you haven't really acknowledged before in your normal day-to-day operations. For instance, we had one of our mutual aid departments, or departments that we utilize throughout the county, offered to bring a shelter. We had talked about the rain, we talked about the cold weather, and it was one of these blow-up shelters was heated and everything, and it really worked neat. And you don't realize oftentimes that these are available to you until you come to an exercise like this, or an event that we need to use that kind of thing. And it's kind of neat to realize that, hey, there are resources out there, not only from fire departments, but also from areas such as the Red Cross, like Al said, to help with taking care of victims or patients of a disaster type situation that are available to you.
Initially, you have to identify that you have a hazardous materials problem based on what's going on in the environment, or the product leaking the container, location of the incident. And then the first step is just to isolate and deny entry. So everybody that's involved, we can't change that initially if they were there when it spilled. So you isolate the area, and that's what the first arriving units do. They say, oh, that's bad, we should stay away from that, keep everybody else out. Everybody that can come out, come over here, and you have to get the chemicals off them, start doing EMS and so on. And then once you identify the products, which is the next step, identify what exactly it is you're dealing with, what is likely to occur based on this chemical and the atmosphere today, the environment, the temperature, and so on. Then you have to come up with a plan to stop it from doing what it's doing, or just to stand back and let it do that and move the people away, evacuate them out of the neighborhoods, because we can't interrupt this chain of events. But if we can't interrupt it, they'll select the appropriate clothing, which are the suits. They'll go into that area with the plan. They'll verify that the chemical they think they're dealing with is the chemical that's there by using monitoring, using different analysis techniques. And if it is, then if they can stop it, plug the leak, shut it off, neutralize it, then they'll go ahead and stabilize it, and then they'll come out of the emergency mode. And then the environmental end of it, cleanup can take a long time. So we have to determine what aspects of the environment have been damaged, if any, and what remediation events need to take place to get the area back as close to normal as it was before the incident.
We had a couple of aldermen. Waukesha has 15 aldermen who volunteered to be victims of any kind of illness disaster, and one of our aldermen, Alderman Lichty, happened to be the victim of chemical kinds of burns, and he was taken to Waukesha Memorial Hospital, and actually he contaminated their emergency room, which again was part of the plan for the hospital to know how they would then go into a second act. But I thought it was sort of heartwarming in a way that one of our council persons would be getting that role, and then to see again how the hospital could swing into their next stage of plan of how they would then go to another emergency facility, recognizing he had contaminated their emergency room.
Reports from the scene that we have patients that have been involved, have been transported, dealing with the hazardous materials. The sulfuric acid has vented itself in the atmosphere, and that container is no longer an issue according to the City of Brookfield HAZMAT team.
The rest of our field people in, the incident commanders and that, because we think there'll be some value in you hearing their input. As soon as the sandwiches come, like Mr. Pate said, you can go ahead and grab those and grab something to eat. In the meantime, if you haven't filled out an exercise comment form, we would appreciate it. It's just got some stuff on there. If it says under recommendations that you've dictated, like Mr. Clark, and going to get all that stuff to us, we really need the input to come back to things you've seen happen today or thoughts that you've had. Otherwise, we're going to do this drill again next month.
What's kind of interesting is the long-term benefits that we gained from working with the other organizations. The end of the exercise was really kind of, it was something Kevin and I looked at. We had so much done prior to that by gaining relationships, working with these other organizations, that the test date, and I know that was different for the perspectives of the other people, but the day of the exercise really was kind of anticlimactic. It was kind of, we got it done. We were happy that all the volunteers showed up. That saved us. We needed 100 and some volunteers, and we had about 80 some volunteers show up, so we could use people. We had enough people for the Red Cross shelters. So a lot of the things that we couldn't control. We knew fire engines were going to be where they were. We knew that, you know, people who were on our payroll were going to show up. They had to. It was all the volunteers and the community support that helped us out. We had a lot of people show up to get moulaged at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, to put makeup and go lay in the buses and do all those things. So that was probably one of the things that we're happy that it happened and worked out real well. But the long-term benefit of developing relationships, not only with other organizations, but even working with Golden Guernsey, was invaluable. And a lot of the long-term effects, I think, are going to come more, not from just the observations that were made during that day, because a lot of those things were easy process things that can be addressed, and some of them are long-term that are ongoing. But some of the relationships and the ability to work better with the different agencies and realize the assets that are in the community to help us deal with emergencies and find out that, hey, we've got a problem, and thinking that, geez, we're going to have to handle it ourselves, and finding out that, no, the Humane Society could come in and take care of this whole thing and do something, or the Red Cross. So that was very, very beneficial, especially from a long term.
I think if I had a memorable moment, it went pretty well all day. I was just working, like I said, as the administrative person in the OC. If I had to have a memorable moment, after we were all done, all the field units got to leave, and then we brought back all the incident commanders and other people, came back for debriefing. After that debriefing, we had to meet with all of our graders, all of the people who came to help do after-action reports, and Steve and I met with them, and we met for a couple of hours talking about what they saw, their impressions, all of that. And when we're done with those final briefings late in the afternoon, they said, okay, we're all finished, and the folks from FEMA says, you guys want to go have a beer? And I thought, okay, this is over. So that for me was the memorable part of the day, is it's finally over.
Miller time.
Yeah, no, Guinness time.
Oh, Guinness time, that's right.
Being the very professional that I am, after the exercise, I did go home, but then received a phone call from Chief Kroger that said we probably should meet at a establishment in town and discuss it, but we don't need to put that on the film. But anyhow, I don't know, I think most memorable is to see all the different entities working together, you know, and making, you know, making things happen. And that to me is exciting to see.
Kroger had mentioned before, the federal people said that we're here to help you. I think in the long run they really did. We had the opportunity to work with people that have worked across the country with setting up exercises and dealing with emergencies and such, and they were actually able to come here and help us and evaluate our system and give us pointers on how we could better do this or better do that. And I think they were an excellent asset to the city in coming here to work with us.